Hello and welcome. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. So glad that you could take time to be with us today at Open Door. In many Christian traditions around the world, after the Advent season and the 12 days of Christmas, there's a time that they call Epiphany, and we're in the season that many churches call Epiphany. Now, an epiphany is an intuitive grasp of reality through something such as as an event or an experience. An epiphany is an intuitive grasp of reality through something such as an event or an experience. And so we're looking at the passage that many people call the visit of the wise men, or actually more accurately, the Magi, when the Magi came to visit Jesus. And so we'll be reflecting today on the topic of how the wise come to their epiphanies. How we gain a more intuitive and better grasp of reality, and how do we come to the types of events that shape us. So how the wise have their epiphanies. For our text today, we are looking at the visit of the Magi, found in the Gospel of Matthew, the 2nd chapter, and we'll be looking at the first 12 verses. In the time of King Herod, after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, the Magi from the east came to Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the child who has been born King of the Jews? For we observed his star at its rising, and we have come to pay him homage." When King Herod heard this, he was frightened, and all of Jerusalem with him. And calling together all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he inquired of them where the Messiah was to be born. They told him, "Bethlehem of Judea, for so it had been written in the prophet, and you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means the least among the rulers of Judah, for from you shall come a ruler who is to shepherd my people Israel." Then Herod secretly called for the wise men, or the Magi, and learned from them the exact time when the star had appeared. Then he sent them to Bethlehem, saying, "Go and search diligently for the child, and when you have found him, bring me word so that I may go and pay him homage." When they had heard the king, they set out, and there ahead of them went the star that they had seen at its rising, until it stopped over the place where the child was. When they saw that the star had stopped, they were overwhelmed with joy. On entering the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and knelt down and paid him homage. Then, opening their treasure chest, they offered him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. So again, we are reflecting on how the Magi came to experience their epiphany. We're reflecting on how we come to have our epiphanies. One of the and then some of the questions that we have to ask to get there. One of the things that we learn about the Magi, or these, as they've been called, these wise men, but we don't know that they were men, and that we don't know how many there were. But one of the things that we know about them is that they had to make a journey. They had to make a journey, and it was a long journey, and there was nothing easy about journeying in the ancient world. There were no planes. There were no trains. There wasn't even a Greyhound bus. There were no automobiles to take them there. Generally, if they were traveling, they would have had to travel over the roads, either on foot or perhaps on an animal's back. If it was a Western, maybe a wagon. But it would have been a long and difficult trip that they had to make. When they left, they didn't know exactly where they were going, and they didn't necessarily know exactly how long the trip would be. For many of us, when we begin a journey, we may see a sign. They saw a sign of a star, and they knew that the star was pretty significant, but they had to make a decision on whether they were going to make the journey. Many of us, we have to make that decision. How far are we prepared to go? Many times when we first get the experience, it starts off maybe as a light in the sky, kind of like a star, where we don't have a full idea, we don't have a full picture, we don't have all the information in front of us. In my life, one of the things that was really interesting about my journey is I had a sense that I was supposed to go to seminary in Chicago, and I knew that there was something at work that I had a path to do. But I had some decisions to make because I really didn't know where I was going to be in Chicago, how long I was going to be in Chicago, what life was going to look like, what was I going to do afterwards. It was just a light or a star that I had to follow. Many times, this is the way it is for us. We don't necessarily know. We get a sense of a light, and we know that there's something special, and there's something that's drawing us or calling us. But we have to decide whether we are going to make the journey and how far we are willing to go to experience this epiphany. How much trouble are we willing to put ourselves to? They did not have to go. These magi did not have to go. They could have stayed where they were. They were comfortable. They were well off. They didn't need to go to this trouble. They didn't need to go to this inconvenience. In many cases, all of us have to decide whether we are willing to leave our places of comfort. In many cases in my congregation, I've had a chance to hear the stories that people have shared. And in almost every case, when people have shared their story, there's been a journey. And they've had to, in many cases, leave a place of comfort to go and pursue, to go and follow a star, to go and follow an idea where they really didn't have clear idea of exactly how the journey was going to take them, exactly where they were going, how long it was going to be, exactly what it was going to look like. So one of the questions that we have to make and that we have to struggle with and that we have to ponder is, how far are we willing to go to follow the light, to follow the star? Because for many of us, there is a light, there is a star that has been put into our lives. There's this sense of calling, this sense of purpose that is embedded in us that we've come to understand. But yet, how far are we willing to go to experience it, to understand it, to see it, to have it go through? When we think that they were the Magi, they actually traveled as a group. It wasn't a singular person. It wasn't one person who did it, but they traveled together as a group. One of the things about traveling is that people have to be agreed on going on the journey. Even though they didn't necessarily know their destination, they had decided that this was something that they wanted to do together. They wanted to go, and they wanted to see this new ruler, this new Messiah, this new King that was coming into the world. They didn't know, but they were committed to going together. Sometimes we have to travel with companions who also want to experience the same sorts of things that we want to experience, that they too see the star and they would like to go, and they're willing to take this journey with us. That is the function of a really healthy faith community. When a faith community is a group of people that in many cases have been inspired, they may have a star, may have a light, but we begin a journey together to get to a greater epiphany, to get to a greater grasp of reality, to get to a greater understanding, to get to come to a deeper level of knowledge. And we don't know where the journey is going to take us, and the journey is often hard and difficult, and we don't have all the steps. It's not all neatly laid out before us, but we decide to travel together, and we journey together. So how far are we willing to go? How far are we willing to go is the first question. One of the next questions that we see, one of the things that we point out is, in many cases, sometimes the light gets lost. They didn't know exactly. They knew the general area that they were going, and so they went to Jerusalem because that's where the kings were located. And they were looking for the king in the places that they expected the king to be, and they weren't finding him. And the word was out. Apparently, that's how Herod had heard that they were in there. They were in Jerusalem looking around for a king. They saw a star. They didn't know the exact location, but maybe somewhere near Jerusalem, because that's where the king is. And if there's going to be a new king, many times we have our own assumptions that we make, like these magi, like these wise folks, and our assumptions make sense, but our assumptions aren't necessarily aligned with the reality. Many times we presume we have ideas what our spiritual journey is supposed to look like. In this case, they thought they were probably supposed to go to a big castle or to a big temple or to some amazing special place, because they were looking for the birth of a king. And yet, the reality of their journey ended up to be very, very different from what they expected. They ended up going to an extremely humble place, the place where Jesus was born, compared to the palace where the Herod lived, where the king of Israel lived. There was really no comparison. It was so much more humble, and it was so much more modest, and it was not necessarily what they were expecting. Are we willing to change our expectations? First, we have to decide if we're willing to take the journey and how far we're willing to go. Second, we have to be willing to deal with some of the uncertainty that we have. And then we have to decide whether we will change our expectations, because many times things don't turn out the way we would expect them to turn out. That's certainly been my experience in pastoring and in pastoral ministry. This journey is not at all what I've necessarily imagined that it would be, and it's required the changing expectations over time to end up reaching the place of intuitive understanding that's shaped by intuitive understanding, and to reach the epiphany that God had for me. And I believe it's a similar process for all of us, that at some point, to reach the epiphany that God has for us, we have to be willing to change our expectations and to shift, because many times what we expect and how we expect it to work, that's not how it goes. Another question that we have to ask is, what are we willing to give? When they arrived, they gave their treasures from the treasure chest and offered gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. These were all valuable in the ancient world. We know that gold is still extremely valuable today. In order to reach the epiphany, many times we have to give of ourselves. What is it that we're willing to give? What is it that we're willing to do? In the congregation I serve, people have given of their time, their efforts, their creativity. They've given their financial resources. They've given their sweat, and in some cases even their blood, as we do renovation projects. What is it that we're willing to give in order to reach the epiphany? The gifts that they gave ended up being valuable. As the Gospel of Matthew tells the story of Jesus, the Holy Family ended up having to flee to escape the wrath of Herod, in order to save their lives. They were political refugees, if you will. And there's no doubt that these treasures that the Magi gave them, that these wise folks gave them, actually enabled the Holy Family to live and to survive. What kind of gifts can we give of ourselves that will enable the people that we serve to survive the challenges that they face? What are we prepared to give? Then finally, having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they left for their own country by another road. We all have to decide what it is that we're willing to change. What is it that we're willing to change? We, in addition to changing our assumptions, sometimes we have to change the road that we're on. We have to look at things differently. Going by another road might have been difficult. It might have been uncertain. At least if they'd gone back through the old road, they would have really known the way back. But going back through another road meant probably more uncertainty for them. It's a road that they had never traveled before. What are you willing to change after you've reached your epiphany and experienced the epiphany? That's something that we all do. For me, there's certain theological things that I've had to change, and it has not been without some difficulty. It has not been with some inconvenience. Not everyone is going to celebrate when you have your epiphany. We see the Herod was not celebrating the epiphany of that the Magi had. In fact, the Herod was terrified of the epiphany, because it meant that he and his whole caste might have been in danger as they saw it. That the whole way that they ran things could be toppled, and they were scared. Not everyone's going to celebrate our epiphanies. And sometimes when we make changes, and when we make changes, we have to go by another road because people will not necessarily always be supportive of it. So in encapsulation, as we're coming through the time that we've allotted for this, in order to reach our epiphany, in order to develop an intuitive grasp of reality, in order to get to the events and the experiences that transform us, we really have to decide how far are we willing to go. Are we willing to make a journey? Are we willing to leave our places of comfort? Are we willing to leave the places that we know, to go on a journey where we don't actually have all the answers? We don't know exactly where we're going, how long it's going to be. Are we willing to put in that hard work? And are we willing to change our assumptions? The Magi could have said, well, king's supposed to be born in a capital, in a castle. That was their assumption. They had to change their assumption in order to find Jesus and to get to the Holy Family. Are we willing to let go of some of our assumptions and allow reality to emerge in front of us? What is it that we're willing to give? What is it that we're willing to give of ourselves, and how can those gifts make a difference in terms of helping others and be a blessing to others? And what are we willing to change? So how far are we willing to go? What assumptions are we willing to let go of? What are we willing to give? And what are we willing to change? In order for Epiphany to come into our lives, these are the questions that we are faced by the power of the Holy Spirit. May we answer them both collectively as a community and individually in our own lives. Peace be with you.